Well, hello there. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today we are talking Journeys through the Radiant Citadel. Specifically, adventure number 1, Salted Legacy. This is the first adventure presented in Journeys through the Radiant Citadel and is a first level adventure. And I wanted to give you all an overview of how I would run this adventure, as well as kind of a review of the adventure and my thoughts on it. And I'm going to plan on doing this for all of the adventures in Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, going through them adventure by adventure, rather than one big review of the entire book, just because I feel like this is going to give me more of a chance to really sit down with the book, absorb it, think through it, read each adventure a couple times, and then present you with the best version of myself presenting this information. So let's get into what is the Salted Legacy adventure. It is, I think, a perfect form of a first level adventure. The reason I say that is that there's some combat, there's some social interactions, there's a little bit of exploration, but it's in a very contained place. You're in the Dinsing night market, and you're witnessing some conflicts going on in this very well-established market with lots of tradition and family businesses and old rivalries and grudges and all this kind of stuff. It's a very rich world. And from a layout standpoint, just looking at the adventure, first off, gives you a great background on the conflict that you are kind of presented with of these two warring families that, you know, their grudge has ravaged their families historically. And so the current leaders of the family have decided to set aside their differences. But some things have started happening which causes concern and is threatening to cause old grudges to boil over. You have a very handy pronunciation table also, and some setting the adventure. So obviously they have created some different worlds and settings for each of these adventures to take place in, and I'll get into that, but that comes at the end of the adventure, where it gives you kind of the flavor of the world as it exists outside of the Dinsing night market. But they do give you some information on if you want to run it in Eberron or Forgotten Realms. Here is a likely place where this could be stuck in the setting, which I appreciate. And you get some great justifications about why the party would be in the night market. Quick caveat that you're going to see at the end of this adventure is some information on creating an adventure from this land that the night market is set in. If you're planning on running Salted Legacy, I will say don't have a player make a character from the night market or from one of the families that's big in the night market, because part of the conflict is the party being outsiders, them needing to earn the trust of the various families and the various vendors around the market. So if you have a party member or two that are already well established, then that becomes more difficult and you're going to have to do some creative stuff to get around that. So when you're running this, I would recommend encouraging your players to create characters that are visiting the night market for the first time or first couple times. Maybe they are members of a caravan that have come and gone. They come to the night market to drop things off, but they're still outsiders. They're not part of the community here, is the important thing that I'm trying to get to. And the reason I say that this is a great form of a first level adventure is because the party comes across a conflict. They witness members of these warring families going at each other. And because the party members are outsiders, as listed in the book, then they are viewed as politically neutral to a certain extent, and they seem capable. And so both leaders of the family approach the party and saying, hey, if you can prove that the other person is behind the sabotage, the other person's family is behind the sabotage to my stall, then I'll give you some money and unlimited food at my stall. And they get offered this on both sides. And if they take one, then great, you're off to the races. But this adventure does a great job of providing contingencies, where it says, now they witnessed a huge argument, they were fighting, so maybe the party doesn't want to side with either of them straight out of the gate because both of them were being really harsh to the other or whatever reason. Then you have a third party, Kasim, who approaches the party and kind of gives them the lay of the land of the market and the vendors and all that kind of stuff. So that's good that is provided. And you have a fun setup, because it's an investigation. It's not, oh my gosh, there's a bomb somewhere in the market and you have to figure it out. It's an investigation of what's really going on here. But the parties are outsiders, they're not trusted. And so, in order to gain the trust of the other vendors, they have to participate as part of the community in the market. And that comes in the form of the market games. So there are different activities that the player characters have to take part in order to gain the trust and camaraderie and renown in the market. And the first one is a pepper challenge with Kasim and his brother V, the Spicy Brothers, their stall where they sell peppers. And, it's a randomly generated thing. All the peppers look identical. And so you just have to draw one and eat it. And they have various effects that happen. And there's a DC score associated with how spicy the peppers are. And so it's great. And it's if you have 4 party members or more, then it can be just the player characters participating. But if there's fewer, or only a couple of them want to participate, then you can throw some commoners in there to compete against them in order to try and win. You only have to make it through 3 rounds. So it's not going to drag, which is a smart decision process for the market, is that all of them are structured in such a way to where there is a ticking time on it. The spicy pepper challenge lasts 3 rounds. Then you have the battle prawn challenge, which is where they have to do prep work for a shrimp cake that involves cutting up some beans and killing a giant battle prawn. And you have to do that in 6 rounds or less, or else the sous chefs take over and they still make the cake, but you didn't win the challenge. You didn't set the record. And then the last one is the hide and seek challenge, where the party goes under one of the vendors into a little warehouse thing and have to find 4 caterpillars in under 10 rounds. So, which 10 rounds is a while, but it's not combat, so it's not going to drag as much as I feel like 10 rounds in combat would. Either way, I appreciate that there is a cap to where the party won't get bogged down if everybody's rolling really hot for their constitution checks. You're not going to have the spicy pepper challenge take 20 rounds because people are just rolling over and over trying to beat the other one on eating peppers. So I do like the structure of the market games, and they're fun. They're a fun way to get invested in the setting, get invested in the vendors, and learn more about them and gain their renown. But it's not undercut by there being a greater sense of urgency with the main mission. Your job is to investigate what's going on in the market. Nobody will talk to you about what's going on in the market until you gain their trust and respect. So in order to do that, you have to participate in the market games. It makes sense, and it's not logically inconsistent with holy crap, people are going to die. As far as the party knows, nobody's going to die from this. There might be, fist fights in the street, which isn't great. So they're moving with a sense of urgency, but it's not world ending. And then we have in the adventure various tables based on the renown level that the party members have earned via the market challenges. They can have 0, 1, 2, or 3. If they failed at everything, they got 0, then, succeed at 1, succeed at 2, succeed at 3. And the information that the party gets from each of the noted vendors is more and more useful and more pointed as to what's going on. Now, this is, I don't know, I'm conflicted because I appreciate the fact that there's not a whole lot of fat on this section of the adventure. If the party did really well in the market games, they're rewarded for that by gaining the information that they need. But you do run into kind of the situation where if the party did really well and completed all 3 challenges, then in my opinion, based on the clues that they get, it's very obvious what's going on. Maybe not the exact details, but generally speaking, it's pretty obvious who did it in amongst the whodunit of it all. So, some false rumors along the way might be interesting, of somebody lying, particularly somebody that is involved in the scheme that the party interacts with a lot. Throwing out false accusations might do a little bit to lessen the impact of how easy things get after the market games. That being said, it's a first level adventure, and it's not a huge deal breaking thing. This is an adventure designed to get the player characters familiar with their characters, familiar with the setting, your DMing style, all those kind of things. So that I feel like I can be less critical of a first level adventure on those little things. Overall, it's structured really well, and I enjoyed reading it. And I think the whodunit is a fun reveal and is very logical and earnest. So anyway, moving on. You get all of this information, and then the party can put the pieces together, and they can confront the person who did it. Now, obviously, I haven't said spoiler warning up to this point. So if you're a player watching this and asking, should I convince my DM to run this for me? Then yeah, it's a good adventure. It's a good way to kick off a campaign. I'm going to get into my ideas of like where you could go from here with the adventure. But at this point, I'm going to get into the solution of the adventure. So yeah, if you don't want it spoiled, then be gone, go read the book, enjoy it. I enjoyed the book, and we will continue on. So Kasim, the person who approached the party after the big fight and kind of introduced them to the night market, is the one behind this. Kasim has found out that his brother V is getting married and has decided to leave the market and is unsure of his future. V is kind of the face of the business and the person that brings in customers, so Kasim isn't like confident in his ability to continue on with their business. So in order to bolster his own prospects within the market, he would love to buy another successful business to just kind of maintain and keep that going. But that's not really how things are done in the Densing market. So he's trying to get somebody, one of the vendors, so frustrated that they're willing to sell cheap, sell their family business to him. So while Kasim was traveling, he befriended some windlings, which are fey creatures that are on the cover. That's a windling right there. They're adorable. And that's a persimmon that it's holding because that's their favorite fruit. And that's what Kasim has been feeding them. But they can turn invisible. And so he basically like tells them, hey, go play in this vendor's stall. And so they go over there and cause a bunch of damage, but they're invisible the whole time. So nobody knows what's going on. So that's Kasim's big plot, is he isn't targeting anybody in particular. There's stuff going on all over the market. He's just trying to get somebody to be willing to sell their business. So the adventure once again provides contingencies for if the party hasn't figured it out, they didn't get enough renown, so they didn't get the necessary information to where things come to a head. Now, this is my one potential gripe with the adventure, is that the party could entirely miss the conclusion, because it specifically calls out that when the two heads of the family are fighting, if the party hasn't confronted Kasim and figured out what's going on, the two heads of the families begin just fighting in the street. And there's a perception check for a party member to notice Kasim smiling, and he feeds a persimmon to something invisible sitting on his shoulder, like the fruit just disappears. So it can be missed because it's based on a skill check. Now, if you want to run the game that way and just have the party be like, well, we failed, that sucks, guess it's time to move on to the next town, then that's fine. You can run your game that way, run it as written, cool. I like to have a bit of narrative conclusion, so I might have a party member notice it, like glance over and just see it happening, or come up with some other tell, something else that can nudge the party in the right direction to get them to look at Kasim, to figure out that he's the one behind it. And you could have a certain level of consequence if the two heads of the family get to the point of fighting, because that's the balancing act. Either you run it as it's written, where they could just fail, and the party never figures out who was behind this, in which case that is the ultimate consequence of not figuring out the investigation. The alternative, and what I would like, is to still reward them with a narrative conclusion, but withhold the more mechanical or monetary rewards for the adventure. So as written, the party gets 100 gold pieces and free food for life at the vendors. So maybe if the fighting happens, like they can't figure out the investigation in time, the fighting begins in the streets. Maybe have the two heads of the family begin the fighting, but then, the underlings and their kids and everybody starts fighting also. And so the damage to the property and the medical bills to patch everyone after this big fight means the family can't afford to give them 100 gold pieces. Maybe it's 25 gold pieces, and you can still eat for free. That's fine, because we appreciate you, but we just don't have the funds that we had when we offered you this job. Sorry. So that could be how you balance that, of like withholding the mechanical reward while still giving the narrative reward of a satisfying story. Anyway, you can also befriend the windlings and get information from them, which is amazing and adorable, and definitely would be something that I would love to experience as a player, but I'm too dumb to think of that. But yeah, you can do animal handling checks and try to get them to be friendly to you, which is awesome. And speaking of narrative conclusion and narrative satisfaction, something that might leave a few players feeling cold on this adventure is there's no big fight at the end. Kasim doesn't attack you. Kasim doesn't have some grand other weapon laying in wait. Kasim just confesses and says he's sorry, and he was just scared because his brother was abandoning him from his perspective, and he didn't know what he was going to do. He was going to lose his business because he doesn't have the confidence in himself to run it like his brother does. And so, yeah, he was just scared, and he acted based out of that fear. And the party kind of gets to decide what to do with him, because the other vendors are willing to kick him out, and the party can vouch for him and be like, listen, like, he's not a bad guy. Maybe if one of you like took him under your wing and taught him about business, he could be a successful vendor in the market. Rising tides raise all ships, that kind of thing. So somebody take a chance on him. And that could be the conclusion. So it's a very it's a very non D&D ending to an adventure. Like you basically have one fight against a shrimp in the whole adventure, and the rest is investigation, using your heads, talking to people, things like that. Still rolling lots of dice, but not fighting, which is great. That's why I think it's the great form of first level adventure. First level characters are squishy. Got one hit die. It's rolled at max. But if you don't have a good constitution modifier, boo, you're one hefty shot away from being down. So I like first level adventures that don't rely on combat. And this combat is in a very controlled environment. The party could go down. Like, it's entirely possible. The combat is meant to be deadly, but it's in a controlled environment to where that player character can be healed, can recover, all that kind of stuff, and won't be killed in the first adventure that they go out on. So I do really like it for that fact as well. Okay, what was not included in the pronunciation guide is the name of the setting that the Dinsing market is set in. So I'm going to try my best with Siab Sung Ko. Siab Sung Ko is what I'm going with. So you have a whole kind of newspaper article on the night market here from their paper. And then also the features of the setting, kind of the culture and what's important. This culture is all about family, all about tradition, that kind of thing. And they even celebrate found families, and found families can get their own family crest and things like that. So it's a very family driven setting, which I really like. And you have a map here with a bunch of different places in the setting, and you have the monster card for the Windling, as well as a wonderful picture there and some follow-up adventures. So for me, if I'm following up this adventure, if you want to do this as a launching off campaign to just go adventure through adventure in this, there's a way to do that with chapter 1 with the Radiant Citadel, where at this point maybe their investigative skills gets made note of by the shield bearers, and so it's like, hey, you all would probably be good at our job because we don't like to fight first. Especially if they did the whole like standing up for Kasim and explaining his side of things, then yeah, I would absolutely have the shield bearers recruit them and be like, this is how we try to deal with conflict. Like we aren't a fight first organization. We defend people. And so yeah, you can absolutely do that and then get them to the Radiant Citadel and hot dog, you're off. If you're doing it not in the Radiant Citadel, or you just want to start off on your own adventure, maybe in Siab Sung Ko, then I would have something going on with these little guys, the Windlings. They're fey creatures that Kasim just happened to find. And after Kasim found them is when he became mischievous. He started messing with people. So maybe there's a greater fey threat out there that sent the Windlings. Maybe the Windlings aren't evil, but they don't know what they do to people when they're around them. Maybe the Windlings cause people's more tricksy nature to bubble up to the surface. And so as the party travels from the night market or stays around the night market, maybe the Windling are hanging out with someone else and they notice like, wait, this person's starting to act a little different. maybe we should investigate. Kasim, where did you find the Windlings? And Kasim can lead them there, and then you're off on like a Fae centric adventure of what's going on. Why were these Windlings sent with Kasim into the night market? Is there another person that is a vendor in the outer edges, which is where the vendors that can't get into the night market, maybe they're trying to sabotage the whole night market? And so that can be the next step of your adventure, is figuring that out. And wouldn't you know it, there's a greater threat beyond the outer edges. And so you can continue to build from there. So if I were running Salted Legacy, that's where I would take things after that point if I wanted to keep things in the setting. And you could obviously do a lot of great things with a D&D party when it comes to found family, and it would be great. It'd be a lot of fun. So what did you all think of the adventure and my description of it? I really like it. I think it is a great first level adventure. It's a great way, especially for new players. You get to touch on all the different aspects of the game. You get a little bit of combat. You get a little bit of social interaction. You get some investigation and exploration around the night market. So it's a great introduction to the game, in my opinion. And it's very contained and very short. Like, I could easily see this getting knocked out in 2 sessions. And maybe even 1, depending on how well the party gets through the investigation. But no, I really enjoyed it. I'd recommend this whole book, especially. I mean, look at that cover. So pretty. But it's a great book. I plan to continue to go through all the adventures in here to let you know what I think of them and how I would run them. So if you like this, let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like the video. It helps out a whole heck of a lot. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.